Welcome to MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 515, a special Rosh Hashana edition. This program is dedicated in loving memory of Miriam Bas Eliyahu, Altes Allah HaShalom, and Emerita Baruch Ben Yom Ben Menucha Lana, Altes, Yekusil Ben Lei Rachel, and Rachel Bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Tadris by Miriam and Sarah Bas Rachel Altes. As I said, Rosh Hashana is right coming this week, a new year. And as the Alter Rebbe explains in the Geras HaKedesh Simin Yudalet, a new year means new energy. And not just new energy, but he says, a chodosh, a new energy that is unprecedented, that never has shone and shined before, and never will shine again. Unique. And that energy opens up all new opportunities and possibilities. As he learns it from the Pasuk, Eretz asher einei Hashem Elokecha ba mereishis Hashana vad achris Shana. Mereishis in the Torah is written without an aleph. It's missing an aleph. Chassid aleph. Why? As the Alter Rebbe explains, and this is based on Kisvei Arizal, that says that the entire existence goes into a comatose state right before Rosh Hashana, missing aleph, anticipating its renewal through our prayers and through Tkiyah Shofar and Rosh Hashana when this new energy enters. So every new birth always comes through first a void, an ayin. So the Reishis is missing the aleph, and then Rosh Hashana and Achri Shana, which also explains why doesn't it just say just Kol Hashana Kula, Mereishis Vad Achris? Because there's a beginning and then there's the end. And every year, that energy is completely renewed. So let's immediately get straight to the point that's most relevant today, both individually and collectively. How can Rosh Hashanah help us in this time of war in Israel? And the answer is very straightforward. Rosh Hashanah is a completely new energy. That means whatever was going on till now is the past. As the curtain comes down in Tafshin Pei Daled, the Hebrew year 5784, and the new year begins 5785, Tafshin Pei Hey, it's new energy, new opportunities, new possibilities. We're not stuck in the past. And this is coming from above. So the more we make, obviously, a keli, a vessel for it, the more powerful is this experience. And it renews and reinvigorates each of us individually and collectively, all of us. And especially in Eretz asher einei Hashem Elokecha ba mereishis Hashana vad achris Shana. That's the verse. In Israel, in the Holy Land. So besides the bracha and the haftacha, the blessing and the promise, we're told as a certainty. Well, it's a certain promise, meaning a promise with certainty, that there'll be newness in the Holy Land. That the Rebbe should protect every man, woman, and child, protect the holy soldiers, protect the hostages. May they be released safe and sound. May all the pain and the shattered hearts and the brokenness that has happened the last year, who would have believed? It's almost a year. Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is when it all began. When I say all, I mean this past year's events. But now we're standing at the threshold of a new year. And that's the most important thing we need to know. It's not like the cynics say, the more that things change, the more they stay the same. No. Ein kol chodesh tachas hashemesh. There's nothing new under the sun, but above the sun. In language of Chassidus, above Zah. We're constantly drawing new energy. And Rosh Hashana is that chidush for the entire year. That it should be a completely renewed year in every possible way. So that brings us immediately to a question that was asked, that people are asking, and I can't tell you how many questions have come in just the last few days after the head of the Hezbollah was killed, and in general the surgical victories that Israel has been accomplishing the last week So the question is it an open miracle that the Israeli army was able to dismantle the leadership of the Hezbollah terrorists in less than a week? Without even sending one foot soldier across the border, or since it was done through available technology and natural means, it is not considered a miracle. No, it's absolutely a miracle. There are miracles of all sorts. There are miracles that are like Kriyas Yamsuf, parting of the sea. There are miracles that are mislabish, manifest through the very fact that Eretz Yisrael could have a military like that, with that type of intelligence. So there's no question it's a miracle. And as such, another person asks, should we connect the killing of the head of Hezbollah and Israel's recent victories to this time of year? Everything is divine providence. Absolutely. That as we're finishing the month of Elul, Melech Basada, when the king is in the field, month of compassion, of Rachamim, and we're about on the threshold of experiencing a newness, perhaps Yad Aleim Ruach Memorim, the Eibishter sent the new ideas. Eretz Yisrael always had the capacity to do this. And many wondered why it wasn't done earlier, dealing with a sworn enemy. Whether it was the pressures, whether it was their own particular concerns, whatever it may be. But now when you see it happening, you realize the importance of this. You're dealing with an enemy. There's only one way to deal with an enemy. And here's a time where war is actually peace. Because you're fighting with a war with enemies that are sworn enemies. The only way to get to peace is to eliminate them. They have plenty of chance to surrender and make a true peace. So it's not like we want war. And that's the most important thing to always remember. But you have to keep your eyes clear and your sights focused, and not be affected by political or other calculations. Halavai now it should spread now to Hamas, finish off their leadership, and that we can start building a world, both in Eretz Yisrael and abroad, a peaceful world in this new year. Is there a teaching that if a year begins badly, it will end positively? If it begins badly on a sour note, it will end with positively on a high note. Well, 5784 began terribly with October 7th, which was Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, the end of the holiday season, the end of the Yom Tovim. Bakesa Layem Chagenu, Bakesa and Rosh Hashana, concealed, is revealed Sukkot, and the end of Sukkot is Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. So what great positive miracles can we expect in the last few days of Elul before 574 ends, so it closes on a high note? Well, this was written before these events happened. You see it. So indeed, it's a Gemara in Rosh Hashana, Tazayin Omid Beis. It says, Kol Shana Sherosh B'tchilaso, which means any year that is poor, Rosh, and trouble that is beginning, Misasheres B'Seifa, will be made prosperous and rich at the end. Ibam see this fulfillment. It's not yet over. We need a lot more prosperity. But you see this. How did the year begin? Rosh Hashanah was peaceful, relatively. Then came Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, what the world calls October 7th. Mamash see this Maimar Chazal. The Rebbe brings it off in the name of the Rebbe Marash, who explains it al Chassidus in a Maimar in Tofresh Chavches Tiku B'Cheder Shefer B'Kesel Yom Chagenu. But you see the fulfillment of it. And the key thing is that it should be misasheres, in the fullest sense of the word, that the end of the year and the new year should be a completely new prosperous year, prosperous physically and prosperous spiritually and prosperous militarily and victoriously in every way possible. Ach tev li Yisrael, and only goodness for Eden, b'tev anirah v'anigla, in a very revealed way. In that spirit, someone asked the question, is the year following Hakhel a time of diminished energy? Remember, 5783 was a Hakhel year. That follows a Shemitah year. So someone asked the question, is the year after Hakhel year diminished energy? Maybe not intentionally diminished, but since a Hakhel year has such a high energy, Hakhel, Sanoshim, Noshim, V'tav, gathering them all together, similar to the Pasuk, Atem Nitzov Mayem Kulchem. There he counts all 10 categories, but the similar idea. but this was once every 7 years, then going back to normal regular energy the following year would seem like a diminishment. Maybe that's why so many bad things happen in Israel during 5784, and hopefully 5785 will be much better. Look, after the fact, it's always easy. It's always I don't have the right word. Maybe easy is the right word, but it's not the right tone to start saying this is what happened. We don't look at it that way. Even though Shana Mubaris, for example, a leap year, the Rebbeim were careful of, because it reminds of the Miyat HaLevana, the Levana diminishment of the moon, and that's why you need an extra month. But there's no such thing as a locked-in, determined destiny. It's a predisposition that certain times have to be more careful. I've never heard the year after Hakhel is that way. Hakhel adds more energy. That doesn't mean the year after Hakhel is weaker. But I hear what you're saying, and I read it. I won't say that I agree because I have not seen anything like that from the Rabbeim. It's different than Shana Mubaris, than a leap year. But regardless, we're after that year. Now we're going to the new year. Misasheres b'seifa should experience only that prosperity. So now, in that spirit, someone asked, is it significant that the secular anniversary of October 7th is on the 5th of Tishrei? The truth is, I was going to talk about it next Sunday, after Rosh Hashana, because October 7th this year, the secular anniversary of last year's October 7th, is the 5th of Tishrei. But since it's in the same spirit, let me just read the full question. Do secular dates have significance? This year, October 7th, is the 5th of Tishrei. The 5th of Tishrei is the yahrzeit of Rabbi Akiva. And the birth of Naphtali was compared to a deer, a hirsch, tzvi hirsch, in Yiddish, and the American hostage who was killed was Hirsch. Like Rabbi Akiva, there have been many Kadeshim this year who gave their lives al Kiddush Hashem, sacrificed their lives, yeah. Is it significant that the first anniversary of October 7th is the yahrzeit of Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva also laughed because the prophecy was being fulfilled about Mashiach when he saw a fox come out of the ruins of the Beis HaMikdash. May we see it rebuilt with the coming of Mashiach now. So in general, we know Ksev Amim, the Barticheva says about the new year, that the Eibishter counts the way the Goyim, the nations of the world count. So there's some definitely validity and value to secular year. The truth is that the anniversary, sadly, is Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, which, as I've discussed a number of times and will discuss later weeks, celebrates the indestructibility of the Jewish people. But to say, if we can learn a lesson from it, like the Rebbe Rashab said, he didn't like when people said Pshetlach, interpretations in Tanya, but if it adds an Avedis Hashem, he didn't mind. If we can learn a lesson that the 7th of October is a few days after Rosh Hashana, the 5th of Tishrei, Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and that demonstrates the Misasheres B'Seifa, which leads into Misasheres, a wealthier, more prosperous year in Tavshin Pei Hey, by all means. And with the new energy of Rosh Hashana of this year, that brings a newness, that whatever happened then, we always know Yerid Seder Chaliyah, descent is only for a greater ascent, Yisra Na'er Min Acheshach, greater light that comes out of darkness, and that causes us to increase in Torah mitzvos, in Torah mitzvah v'Torah eir, then by all means. So then it's in the spirit of what we've been talking about, that even though something was negative, it ultimately leads to ashirus, to wealth and prosperity and success in every possible way. Kasher yana esam ken yirba v'chen yifritz. As they were afflicted and oppressed, in direct proportion to that, they thrived and they flourished. Like we say, Min ha-meitzer karosi ka, like we'll say before Tkiyas and Rosh Hashana. From my distress, I call out to God. From my dire straits, meitzar, a constrained, distressed state, anoni b'merchav ka. God responds b'merchav with full expansiveness. Very similar, that a year that begins with Rosh, Achris, Reishis, that's missing an aleph, from the word Rosh, poor poverty or poor, weak, ends with Achris, which is connected to Ashirus, to wealth and prosperity. Good. And like Rabbi Akiva did, whose yahrzeit is on Hey Tishrei, Rabbi Akiva indeed saw that. He saw in the churban, in the destruction, the Seso Amanas Livnes, the destruction in order to bring something even greater, the building of the next Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. The third Beis HaMikdash, Mikdash Adonai Keinu Yodecha. Okay. Going back to the themes connecting Rosh Hashana to this particular year, I do want to add, and I'll talk about it more as we go along, that this is a macrocosm regarding Eretz Yisrael, Rosh Hashana Vad Achle Shana, Eretz Yisrael She'enei Hashem Elokecha Ba. But the truth is, all these lessons also apply to each of us individually. Besides the fact that individually we're also part of this whole challenge, and each of us has to increase in our Aveda and Torah mitzvos, the spiritual war that we need to wage, but also individually, whatever we may be going through in life, and people have their ups and downs. So know any challenges that were there as this past year, all that we spoke about applies to you personally as well. So I don't want to just keep it, so it's not just the collective. Okay, next question. Should we be thanking God for these recent successes and victories? So dear Rabbi Jacobson, in regard to Israel dismantling much of Hezbollah's weapons and infrastructure before they were able to assemble and use them to launch a serious attack against Israel, a viewer asked a question, this is a few weeks ago, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, if any event like this ever happened before in the Torah. It was last week. There we didn't have yet the killing of Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, but there was already the beepers and the pagers were exploding. So a viewer asked the question if any event like this ever happened before in the Torah. So this writer is responding to that, which is very gratifying to hear people listening and responding. This is exactly the purpose of this program. It should be an interactive experience. I think the answer is yes, writes this person. When Sancheiriv had hundreds of thousands of soldiers surrounding Jerusalem, and they planned to do an attack the next morning, but in the middle of the night, God made a miracle and sent special angels to Sancheriv's camp and killed 185,000 of his men, and the surviving soldiers got scared and ran away, and they weren't able to do an attack. Okay, but we are taught after this miraculous victory, King Chizkiyahu made a big mistake and forgot to say Hallel, to praise Hashem for the miracle. Therefore, we shouldn't make the same mistake Chizkiyahu made. The Rebbe actually quoted this in the miracle of Entebbe and other miracles, that because he didn't say shir, he didn't praise. Now, I'm not a rabbi that has the authority to install new customs and holidays, so I'm not suggesting we say full Hallel with a bracha, but we can add, and we are allowed to always say extra Tehillim, Psalms. So I suggest everyone say extra Tehillim, and specifically Psalm 113, which is part of Hallel, and to put extra money in tzedaka, and to say to Hashem, thank you for making miracles to protect us. We appreciate it. So again, ideas that are definitely legitimate. It's not creating any new customs or anything. To say thank you, just like we request when we're in time of need to say thank you. But also I would include in the thank you also, let's get the job done completely. It's not over yet. We still have the enemies, we still have threats, we still have hostages in captivity, and so on. Soldiers under attack, in danger. So yes, we should definitely be saying thanks. And it says that's why he wanted to make Chizkiyahu Mashiach, and that's why he wasn't made Mashiach. Can you imagine? Because he didn't sing praise properly or enough. So in that spirit, there's the next question. Should we be celebrating the fall of our enemies? It's a topic I've addressed last week and a few weeks ago. There's a follow-up to what I spoke about. So I speak about I was saying in general, we don't celebrate the fall of our enemies. But someone took issue with that, more than one person. So let me read one of the responses. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, thank you for your weekly video cast, MyLife Chassidus Applied. As we celebrate the fall of Nasrallah, head of Hezbollah, and his chieftains, including his replacement who was killed merely hours after assuming leadership, I have to disagree with your interpretation that B'nefei levecha al tismach means that we shouldn't rejoice when our non-Jewish enemies fall. Aside from the clear biblical verses, which are many showing we should, just to quote two of many, in Proverbs 11:10, when it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. And when the wicked perish, there's song. Psalms 58:11, the righteous will rejoice when he sees revenge. He will bathe his feet in the blood of the wicked. So in addition to that, we have the holiday of Purim, which celebrates, among other things, the downfall of Haman and his hanging on the gallows. I can tell you one thing for sure. We here in Israel are celebrating the death of Nasrallah and the early demise of the upper echelons of the Hezbollah terror group. May we continue to hear such joyous news. Okay, so let me respond. So first of all, let's make this clear. Is there a simcha when a Hitler was killed and the end of such a horrible thing? Of course there's this element of joy. An enemy who wants to kill you is eliminated. And I'm not coming here to say, no, we shouldn't honor that. I just spoke about praise, shira. But you have to also remember, why are we praising? We're praising not just because we feel good, even though that's also fair. We had enough tzaddis, and just like we cried, we're allowed to be given the ability to breathe and be able to smile and be able to say, hey, at least some good news here. And maybe this will be the beginning of the end of all our enemies. So that's not what we're discussing here. The question of Torah, the Torah wants to do us to be the healthiest and possible way. So what it means, and how do you reconcile that with the other verses? So if you look it up in detail, you'll actually see there are different commentaries. There are commentaries that actually say enemy there means Jewish enemies. Meaning, a person, let's say, was someone who's, you and that person have a sichsuch, an argument. A Jewish person, you were partners in business. Then whatever reason it fell apart. And you don't particularly like each other. And that person fails, don't gloat. Whereas if you're talking about Sheni Yisrael, enemies, like we're talking here, real sworn enemies ready to kill you, it's a different story. That's one comment, some commentaries say that. And there are other different commentaries. But on the other hand, we have the Gemara that says when the Egyptians were drowning in the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, and the Malachim said Shira, Hashem said, my seed yodai, my handiwork, my creations, my people that I've created are drowning and you're singing praise. So how do you reconcile that? And the obvious question is, the Yidden did sing praise. Oz Yosher Mesher B'nai Yisrael, there Hashem didn't tell them don't sing praise. And there they also mentioned the drowning of the Egyptians. You could say that the main praise was the praise of their victory, of them surviving, of them finally being freed. But they also mentioned the enemy. So overall, the general explanation, and I'm sure there are many different explanations, the Torah wants us to be the healthiest. Gloating, even on the worst enemy, is not the goal. The goal is not just to eliminate the enemy. That's only because we have no choice. So there's an element of a certain bittersweet element that human beings can stoop to that level. That's what I spoke about. And that we have rachmanis on them, because they made a choice, a terrible choice, to be killers. And the only way to eliminate them was killing, because they're not ready to surrender and they're a constant threat. So that side. But what's really going on here is that we are, when you say, for example, that Tzaddik in Tanya hates evil, he doesn't hate evil like a hater. He despises anything that's not Kedusha, that's not Elikus. As soon as you have something that's anti-Elikus, you already are completely disturbed. So therefore, there's a certain element of Simcha when there's a Gilui Elikus. So the focus is not so much on the destruction of the evil, it's on the fact that anything that was a adversary and defied God's will, in this case also the Jewish people, and the threat to them, that's what you're celebrating. Now, is there an element also of celebration of that person deserved what they got? Fine, I'm not going to get into now the extent every one of us is different, we're human beings after all, and there's an element of Shalei L'Shma even, that's also acceptable. But the key point is that the focus is not on the death of God's creation. It's on the victory of God, even against those that defied him and defied life and a threat to innocent people. So I don't think there's a real disagreement here. I'm not saying that people shouldn't celebrate. Another point I want to keep in mind is humility. even though this is not a perfect example for the same reason. The Alter Rebbe wrote Katenti Mikol Achsadim after Yutas Kislev. So he said, don't gloat. Lo Yisrak, Al Yisrak Aleim. Don't gloat. Focus on Poli Yamamanan. I'm using my own language, but the Rebbe's words. I'm bringing light. Our job is not just to eliminate darkness. So it's also a matter, a lesson of humility. Because remember, we also don't want to become arrogant here and become and be lulled into a certain sense of confidence. Look what we've done. Look what we could do. Because we still have an enemy out there. So even when you celebrate a victory, if you're a commander-in-chief or even any part of the military, you have to always keep vigilant because there's still an enemy lurking out there. And we're not completely out of the woods. So all of that combines that you have to know how to do this. And again, there's a certain element of, yes, eliminating such a threat, but to also keep in mind the other factors that I just explained. And that's how I think we're all on the same page. I don't think there's a fundamental disagreement here. Okay. What can we do on Rosh Hashana to ensure the safe release of the hostages and the final victory over our enemies? So that's, of course, the next critical thing. Rosh Hashana is coming. What the military has to do, we know clearly they have to be strong and vigilant and not give in and not show any weakness. You have the enemy at their throat. They have to understand that they have only one option, total surrender and change, or they will be eliminated as a threat. But we also know that we have to do, what do? The spiritual part of the war. Rosh Hashanah is coming. And part of our prayers are about a better year, and the destiny of nations, Ala Medina's Baya Omar, is determined on Rosh Hashanah, as well as the destiny of individuals. So there are things we can do. So someone asks, it's been almost a year, and we still have 100 hostages suffering in captivity in Gaza. What is one thing we can do, or one special prayer we can say on Rosh Hashanah that will guarantee that Hashem will bless them, that they are safely rescued right away? Well, first of all the prayers are dedicated to a better year, and of course also elimination of enemies, and the nations of the world should be peaceful, and the nations of the world should be benevolent, and should be kind and respect and honor the Jewish people. So it could be a kavanah in Al Medina's Bey Omar. The Alter Rebbe's kavanah was during Shofar, where he prayed for that Alexander should win the war over France, because he felt that was better for the Jewish people, and that's what happened. So it's hard for me to designate which prayer. I don't want to be a person who's that. I don't feel I have that authority. I think you should choose a prayer that fits. Could be anyone, and you have their kavanas. As I said, Al Medina's Bey Omar is right there in Musaf, when we say in Musaf of Rosh Hashana. But the truth is, every tefillah is worthwhile doing that, and that's what we should be doing. In other words, having the kavanah intentionally, especially Rosh Hashanah tefillahs, where the heavens are open, to ask for all of these blessings for the hostages and for the soldiers and for all the Yidden in Israel, all the Jews, to be at peace and protected and without any threats and danger. Do we have a spiritual nuclear option, quote unquote, a special prayer that is reserved for very serious times like this? Or, as is taught in the Basel Legani Maimer, that when the kingdom is under threat and we are in a desperate situation, that the king authorizes bizbuz ha'etzos, splurging the treasures. How can we tap into those treasures and use our spiritual secret weapons to help the hostages during this extremely serious situation? Thank you. May we all hear good news right away. Well, first of all, bizbuz ha'etzos na'avodah, the midas hanitzachon, is when we are determined and we're not complacent and not apathetic and indifferent, but we dig deeper, a sense of urgency. Literally like a soldier wakes up early and knows he's constant on call, we have to be constantly on call to reach out to a Yid, say a kind word, to introduce a Yid to the Shofar in Rosh Hashana if they're not aware of it, to inspire, a tzedaka charity, to add an extra mitzvah, extra learning Torah, lighting candles for Rosh Hashana and then Shabbos, which brings light into the world, especially mezuzah, which is has the quality of protection. Tefillin has the quality of protection and driving fear in the enemy. But do it in a way that you're at war, not a part of it, not in a neutral way, with urgency, with passion, with commitment, in a nuclear fashion. And thank God, this is not a physical weapon, it's a spiritual weapon. And Bizbaz Eitzes includes digging deeper, being more creative, doing something you wouldn't have done regularly because of the situation. Now we know Sefer Tehillim is one of that nuclear options. We know that whenever they're in need, David HaMelech, Yil Rotzen Imre Fi, said Tehillim, and God infused the Tehillim, the Psalms, with a special power to pierce heavens and abolish decrees and bring good news. So all that fits in. And anything else that Chazal and Torah says have special strengths, particularly in trying times, that's what you do. And we see this. We gather together, we increase in Torah and Aveidig Milos Chasadim, in Tehillim, in tzedaka, and some of the other things I mentioned, and I'm sure there's more when you dig deeper and are splurging the treasures. In that spirit, someone wrote a beautiful story which answers the question, does intensifying commitment to Torah, mitzvos, and unity help us win our battles? So let me read it exactly as it came in here. Hi, Rabbi. I'm a reservist with the IDF. For security reasons, I can't divulge operational details, but I want to share a story that happened a few weeks in Gaza. I guess a few weeks ago in Gaza. There was one soldier in our unit that brought a musical instrument with him called an oud. It's like a small guitar. At night in his tent, he liked to play religious music before going to sleep. Some of the other soldiers in the unit didn't like hearing the religious music. They nicknamed the soldier Udi and tried to do things to make things difficult for him. When it didn't stop him or discourage him, they tried to make up fake stories about him, and they smeared Udi to the commanding officer to try to get him kicked out of the unit. Thankfully, the commanding officer didn't believe the fake stories, but he told Udi that to keep peace within the unit, if Udi wanted to play music at night, he should go 100 meters away from the tents, so those who didn't want to hear it wouldn't be disturbed. One night, when Udi was on the outskirts of our camp playing his music, he heard a noise and realized it was a group of Hamas terrorists coming up from a secret tunnel, and they were planning to ambush our camp. He communicated what he saw to the unit, and we were able to neutralize the threat before they were able to do a sneak attack on us. Once everyone realized it was Udi that helped us and saved our lives, the same guys who disliked him hugged him and thanked him and asked him to play a song, and everyone danced together. What can be the moral of this story? Maybe it could be that we should always be nice to everyone, because maybe one day someone you don't like could be the one to save your life. Maybe another moral can be that sometimes adversity forces us to unite with each other. What are your thoughts? My thoughts are that I second what you're saying, absolutely. And you see, besides, in general, singing a song, say a religious song, I guess it means on a verse, on Tehillim or another verse, that power, but also simcha, which lifts the spirits. Simcha Peiris Geder. Literally, Peiris Geder, it breaks through barriers, which is part of what a battle is about. So I think it's just an inspiring story all around, many, many lessons. But going back to our theme, there's much we can do. We were given spiritual weapons and tools and instruments, in addition to military tools and instruments and weapons and arms. And that is equally important. As we see, attitude is important. You can have all the best weapons, but if your attitude is down, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, chapter 26, even if you're stronger, but if you're depressed or you're down, you won't be able to win and wrestle with someone who may be weaker than you, because the spirit is not there. and all the other factors and power that Torah mitzvahs brings, amunah, betochen, Hashem's strengths that empower Eretz Yisrael. Let's not kid ourselves. All the miracles happening, yes, Israel is smart, the Jews are smart, they have technology, they have intelligence, they have strategy, but it all comes with God's blessing. And I think everyone knows that, during the 6-day war, and now these events. But you have to be a keli to it. When you start mixing your seichel, like the famous the joke they say, guy became very wealthy, he said, they asked him, was it mazel or was it seichel? He said it was 95% mazel, 5% seichel. And if it was 100% mazel, I would be a lot wealthier. But Hashem wants us to use our seichel. But now don't forget that the blessing manifests in what you do, in your actions, and how you prepare. Okay. Yet another part of the nuclear option, so to speak, spiritually. Someone else writes very beautifully, should we be gathering children during these days to say extra prayers, study extra Torah, give extra tzedaka, as the Rebbe instructed in previous times of challenge? So someone writes like this, the summer before the Yom Kippur War, the Rebbe put a great emphasis on the power of children's prayers and asked for children's rallies to be held. I was a small child, but I remember being in 770 and hearing the Rebbe talk, and then hearing Rabbi J.J. Hecht translate the talk into English. Then the Rebbe gave us all dimes to put in tzedaka. Probably years later, he switched to dollars because of inflation. Diminished. Even though I was a small boy, I remember these rallies fondly, and I consider it a great schus, merit, to have been in attendance. Although I'm not yet a scholar or Talmud Chacham, as a layman, I would say the Rebbe saw the dangerous threat unfolding in Israel and used the power of these rallies to offset the great danger and to protect Israel. Therefore, I must ask, in today's dangerous times in Israel, would it be a good idea for all the yeshivas in Crown Heights to organize a similar rally in 770 with singing, davening, words of inspiration, and giving of tzedakah in order to help offset the dangers of today? If it's a good idea, then how do we get the ball rolling and get this done as soon as possible? Absolutely. Not even a question, it's a good idea. And even more than one rally. We've seen the Rebbe did that too, especially in Tishrei. And not just in Crown Heights, but all over the world. So I'm using this platform to put the word out there. I'm sure others are coming up with it as well, but never take anything for granted. And hopefully we'll emphasize it. We'll try to encourage different media platforms and others to post this message. But the most important thing is that it comes from all of us, grassroots, and encourage your rabbis and teachers and educators and schools and organizers. And absolutely, now more than ever. The Rebbe would always quote me, from the mouth of babes, which is A's, comes as foundation of A's, Ein A's Elatera, the strength of Teda, to eliminate the enemy and those that want to exact vengeance on you. And many other verses. What Mordechai did when he gathered children to say psukim, utze esav v'sufar, dabadover le'yokum, ki imanu keil, and other psukim. And in general, the strength of children is a tremendous strength. The Maimer v'kibla Yehudim, from Purim Kotten Tofresh Peizayin, the Rebbe quotes so often, a time of Gzeirus, and the Friedrich Rebbe spoke strongly about the chinuch v'tenekes shel Beis Rabban, and tens of times that come to mind where the Rebbe would invoke bringing children into the picture, because children have a unique power to break through. Tenekes shel Beis Rabban, Hevel she'en beichet, a breath that has no transgression, has particular power and energy, especially in the time of this time of year. So, what I must say, I'm very gratified that most of this is coming, as you see, from readers and listeners. I'm reading what you've written. People are thinking, that's beautiful, and you're sharing. I'm sure many of you have ideas that have not written them. I encourage you to write them. You can write it to us, and we'll publicize it, or post it any other way. The key thing is to get out there and show that we are proactive. That's how you win wars. Look what's going on right now is a proactive. Israel is not just waiting, God forbid, for an attack. They're proactively preempting the enemy. And the same thing in Ruchnis, to be proactive. There's no more powerful lesson than being proactive. And when Hashem sees that, you can imagine that's the best keli, the best container and channel for the Eibishter giving us proactively His blessings without having to wait to hear every request we make. And in that context, someone else writes the following request. May I ask Rabbi Jacobson for a favor? And this is based on this question. How can we encourage the Israeli leadership to continue to stand strong and not back down and succumb to outside pressures? May I ask Rabbi Jacobson for a favor? It's been in my mind throughout this endless war in Israel. Being that you are an influential figure among prominent leaders and possibly politicians as well, I would appreciate if you could contact Bibi Netanyahu or someone in his cabinet or an important member of the IDF and let them know that we are very proud of them. There has been many a time where outside pressure would cause Israel to succumb and seek an untimely ceasefire, or a so-called peace treaty, quote unquote, hence leaving the enemy to Chas v'Shalom strike again, or cause a ridiculous peace arrangement by giving a part of our holy land to the enemy, causing them to get at Israel at a closer distance and begin the war all over again with a closer advantage. We are finally sticking to our guns. We are not stopping, we are not surrendering, and we will continue until the evil enemy will be crushed, weakened, bombed out, with absolutely no more strength to attack us ever again. Please, please, let someone know that we are behind them. Continue being strong and not giving in to any type of pressure from anyone, even United States. I feel strongly that it's important that we stand with them and we are proud of them. Please continue holding on strong. Don't stop fighting for a moment and let these cruel, evil animals once and for all get what they deserve for so long, what they for so long deserve. Umalchus harisha mehedet ta'akar v'tishaber v'timager baruch atah Hashem shever evim u'machnia zaydim. Amen. Okay, speaks for itself. I will do my part. And hopefully everyone listening to this, and anyone that gets the message, should do their part. And absolutely, this is the time, this is how you deal with a battle with an enemy, a sworn enemy. You start hearing their statements. I mean, your blood chills. To eliminate such an enemy is like eliminating literally pekuach nefesh, like more than a reidiv. A reidiv is one person running with an knife. Here's a person with an entire arsenal, entire armies, legions, proxies of Iran, an axis of evil. So absolutely, we have to do everything possible to eliminate it, and then there will be possibility for peace. Those that want to make peace will make peace, just like some of the countries, the Arab countries, have already made peace. Okay. So, let us continue. As you see, the themes of Rosh Hashana are intertwined with the events of our time, and makes total sense because that's what we're addressing now, what we're dealing with. So in that spirit of being strong, the question, should we return land for hostages? So we talked about this, but I'll just address it at least briefly. The Rebbe took many firm stances on different issues, but two issues that stand out to me is the value the Rebbe had for every Jewish life, and the stance that not 1 inch of land of Israel should be given up. Knowing the Rebbe's positions and opinions based on his writings and speeches, could we surmise what the Rebbe would say if faced with the dilemma of trading hostages for land? Yes, the land belongs to Hashem, and we may not have the legal right to give away even an inch. But when it comes to saving lives, we're allowed to violate the Torah. We can violate Shabbos to drive someone to the hospital. So do you think the Rebbe would permit giving away land to save the lives of the hostages? So I addressed this a while back in the halachas of Pidyon Shvuim, which is the mitzvah rabbah, one of the greatest mitzvahs, a tremendous mitzvah. It, however, qualifies that if it becomes an incentive, like let's say someone takes a hostage, God forbid, and they want a ransom, and it's an exorbitant amount. So there's discussions. Someone can afford it. What happens if someone can't afford it? And what happens if that incentivizes? They'll take more hostages because they see you're paying up. So pekuach nefesh can go either way. By actually giving something to the enemy, they'll make it easier for them to take more hostages, and that would include land, precious land, which is literally on the border, and that's why we have Siman Shin Chavtes that the Rebbe says. That even if they come to talk to you about commerce, but they're your sworn enemy, you're supposed to bear arms and go to and be ready for war. So if you're going to do something, it's like saying, you know what? You'll give us back our hostages, but in return, we will give you ammunition. We'll let you build tunnels. Pekuach nefesh is not just a wild solution. It has to be balanced properly. If you're saving one person, but it's going to cause many more people to die, or possibility, you have to take that into account. This still does not mean we compromise, God forbid, any life. But if the Nazis, for example, at the end of World War II said, you know what, we'll release 1,000 Jews from a concentration camp, stop shooting at us. So you have to put it into context. And that's part of the bigger discussion here. That's also part of the strength. Not to negotiate with hostages. Motzei Shabbos Pasha Bamidbar, Tafshin Lamed Tes, the Rebbe actually spoke about it. So you can look it up in the original source. It's also a recording, it was Motzei Shabbos. So now, how aggressive should Israel be in its war against Hamas and Gaza? I think the latest events have pretty much verified and established that negotiations is just a way to allow the enemy get stronger and come back with more ferocious attacks. So a person wrote it this way. There was a book I read years ago where the plot was that a guy faked his own death and made it look like a murder in order to frame someone. And the framed person was convicted on circumstantial evidence and served 15 years in jail for a murder he didn't commit. That didn't even actually happen. A few years ago, he got out of jail. He ran into a guy who wasn't really murdered and said, I could kill him right now and the cops can't do anything because I already served 15 years for your murder. The world is accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza, regardless of all the evidence proving the contrary. And Israel is suffering due to these false accusations. I wonder if Israel should just go ahead and kill everyone in Gaza and solve the problem once and for all. This will guarantee there will never be another attack from Gaza, and the world already punished Israel for a genocide they didn't commit, so nothing new will happen because they already paid the price for it. Okay, I read it even though it's somewhat, I would say, politically incorrect and disturbing, but I want to qualify. No. So I know you're writing anonymously, your name is not associated. I'm reading it, my name is associated with this program. So I want to make it very clear, no, that's not... The reason we don't kill civilians is not because we can't get away with it. It's because that's not what we do. That's not the way of Torah. Torah is to bring peace to the world. We have no choice. Even when we attack enemies, it's because there's no choice. So of course we will do everything to protect innocent people. Who is innocent or not is another discussion. But that's not our approach, looking for a way, since we're being accused anyway. Just want to make it clear. But people are thinking like this because it's true. It's infuriating how Israel is being accused. They were attacked. Hostages are killed and Israel's accused. Why they're not doing enough for these hostages? They killed them in cold blood, the enemies. So I think that's the problem. So, how aggressive? That's already a military strategy. Not because we're already being accused, might as well go ahead and do things we shouldn't do. Military strategy. To get to the enemy, to get to the head of the enemy, eliminate the leaders, and turn it into a situation where there will be either total surrender or total destruction of the enemy. They always can surrender. No one talks about that. And that would end everything. A true surrender with conditions that a winner dictates over a loser. Okay. So one final thing regarding the battles, because there's more to talk about on Rosh Hashana, but again, this is timely. So should Charedim join the IDF? So I spoke about it several weeks. So someone took issue, or at least commenting, Rabbi Jacobson Sheyechia. You recently took a question from someone who criticized the Charedim in Israel who don't serve in the army. As a mother of 5 young men who all served in the army, and unfortunately none of whom are presently Torah observant, I'd like to comment. To the best of my knowledge, the Rebbe did not allow Bachim to go to the army, but only married men. I think that only exceptionally Chassidish Bachim who consider it as a shlichus are able to survive spiritually in the IDF. This includes the so-called Haredi units, which are largely comprised of boys from Haredi families, many of whom have dropped out of yeshiva and Haredi life. In my opinion, for the average bacher to be drafted into the IDF is like spiritual suicide, or at least like playing Russian roulette. I am pained by people who know nothing about life in the IDF People who know nothing about life and the idea spout opinions about who should serve. Devoted Torah learners are also protecting us, and for them to be drafted might well put us in more danger. May Hashem watch over all His people, Israel, and send Mashiach now. With thanks for all your efforts and good wishes for Ksiv v'chsimeteva l'shana teva mesuka. Your points are well taken, especially coming from a mother with children who were served. And you should see much nachas from them. They were moiser nefesh, which is maybe the greatest mitzvah a person can do for protecting others. But the main point we were discussing was not really what you're addressing here. Was, remember, if you're talking about pikuach nefesh, and even though, yes, the IDF may pose challenges, the question is, if you need these soldiers, and if you don't have anyone else, and it can weaken the defense and the protection of Israel, what do you do then? And we, of course, spoke about people who go to the spiritual war and learning Torah like a soldier. But what about many who are not? So we're not talking about forcing anyone. The question is, what is the right thing to do? It's not about compelling or drafting. It's about what's the right thing up in Torah to do. I just wanted to contextualize what we're discussing here. Okay. So now that we covered Rosh Hashana, we'll call it in the context of the war in Israel, and all wars, everything we're talking about applies to us also personally. Let's cover some more questions. I have so many that have come in the last week. There's no way I can cover them all. But let me talk about a few of them. Let me see how far we can go. And again, appreciate ChassidusApplied.com is our website where you can submit any question completely anonymously. You can also find archives of previous programs, previous Rosh Hashana related programs, and many other Chassidic resources that help apply Chassidus to our lives. So let's do a few more now about Rosh Hashana in general that came in. What do we learn from Rosh Hashana and the Shofar in general terms? So we spoke about Rosh Hashana as chidush, renewal, Shana Chadash, a new year, the Er Chadash that enters our lives and the world in general, and therefore new opportunities. Shofar, of course, is the primary mitzvah in Rosh Hashana. So how does Rosh Hashana empower us? It provides us with a completely new energy, new keiches, new strengths, new opportunities, new possibilities, coming straight from above. And when we allow it to enter into our lives, it can change everything. So that's above all. Does anything new happen on Rosh Hashana? And if yes, why don't we feel it? So the person writes like this: a year represents the time it takes for the earth to travel around the sun. Every year it orbits in the exact same path and ends up in the same place. So why do we celebrate Rosh Hashana if nothing new seems to physically happen? So first of all, it's not like a sphere. It's more like a spiral. Yes, it's the same orbit, but on a different axis, on a different plane. And that's what's new. So there's the lunar cycle, there's the solar cycle. So even physically, there's something new. But the most important part is the spiritual part. Rosh Hashanah is recreating Zeh HaYom Tchilas Maasecha, the day of the beginning of your creation. That when God created the world, it was Rosh Hashanah. Now we know Rosh Hashanah was the 25th of Elul, 6 days before Rosh Hashanah. But on Rosh Hashanah was the creation of the human being, Adam and Chava, male and female. La'avda l'shamra. They celebrate the first Rosh Hashanah by gathering the whole creation and dedicating and saying, we are here to serve God. That's our purpose. So we're recreating that Zeh Yom Tchilas Maasecha every year, Rosh Hashanah. Now, in general, spiritual things are not always felt in a crass world. That's why we need to be more sensitive. And there are those that do sense it. Do sense what I mentioned before, that Arizal says, that the whole world goes into a slumber, a cosmic slumber, anticipating, waiting, anxiously, will my contract be renewed? And then, when you didn't blow shofar, or in general the Aveda of Rosh Hashanah, the tefillas, the prayers of Rosh Hashanah, the new energy enters, an unprecedented energy. And if you are focused on it, and not distracted by externals, sometimes you can feel the newness. Which brings me to the question is, why is there a minhag Why do we buy new clothes before Rosh Hashana? Why is there a minhag to buy new clothes before Rosh Hashana? Do we think Hashem cares what we look like and only gives a sweet new year to those well-dressed with new clothes? Wouldn't it make more sense to use that money for tzedaka? Well, we live in a physical world, and physical things affect us. The fact is, you go to a party, l'havdil, you go to a special event, you wash up, you shower, you put on a new set of clothes. It adds to the feeling, like we say in Gemara says, Dira noa marchiva daita shlodem. A beautiful home expands the mind of a person. Say, why? You need to be expanded? Turn to God. Because we are a physical people that are stimulated by our physical senses. And though we shouldn't worship these senses, but they're part of our experience. Let's say Shabbos, when we make Havdalah, we say psamim, we smell it. A beautiful aroma in the home. A beautiful sight to have a nice home. Didn't know. To have nice svarim. Mezuzah no, a beautiful mezuzah, a beautiful sefer Torah, as the Gemara talks. Zekeli vanvehu. The kovod del tiferes, the big day kohen gadol, the garments of the kohanim in general, especially the kohen gadol. So the physical stimulates and does affect, obviously together with the pnimius of it. And that's the reason we do that. So it helps create a conducive environment for the newness of the new year. Obviously, it's not just the clothing. It's the clothing as a representative. So in that context, we could also mention the custom. Someone asked the question, why do we dip apple in honey? Why do we do things like dipping an apple in honey in order to have a sweet year instead of increasing in Torah, tefillah, and tzedaka like Hashem told us will give us a good year? So here again, the reason that there is sweetness in this physical world because it evolves from sweetness in the spiritual world. Famous, beautiful sikha that Rebbe talks about, the Frierdiker Rebbe, who put candies by the Einfirnish when he was led into the first day to school, to yeshiva, to cheder. So the custom is you throw candies, and you say Malach Machol is throwing the candies. It's a way of demonstrating the sweetness of Torah, similar to when you smear honey or sugar on a page of olive bays or a sharblat of Tanya, when you start teaching children olive bays. So the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't want to throw out the candies, he kept them in his pockets. Came Pesach, they found them in his pockets before Pesach, Erev Pesach. He says, it's Malach Machol threw it to him, why would he want to throw it out? So the Rebbe asked the question, the Klotzkash, educating a child. We know Malach Machol didn't throw the candies. The parents threw them. That's how you educate a child. He'll grow up and realize it wasn't Malach Machol. So the Rebbe said, no, it is Malach Machol, who originates in Chesed of Bria. Where does sweetness in this world come from? The sweetness of honey, of sugar, of candies. It comes from spiritual sweetness. However, it's nislabish like everything. Just like fire originates in Gvura and Mayim, water, in Chesed. Sweetness from spiritual sweetness. The child doesn't know that yet. So just like you teach a child with examples, like the Rambam says. An example, you say, why are you giving an example? Teach him the idea itself. He's not ready yet. As he grows, he'll realize this is a mashal, an example that's a garment for the nimshal, for the moral that you want to teach. So the honey is a physical manifestation of sweetness. And like with the clothing we said, it's a way of experiencing it even on a physical level. So it's not just a spiritual experience, it's also manifesting on a physical level. Okay. So with that, let's go to another question now. Why can't Rosh Hashana begin on Friday as it was on the first Rosh Hashana? As I mentioned, the sixth day of creation was Friday. Now we know Lo Yadu Rosh. Rosh Hashana can't begin on a Sunday. Adu, Aleph, Dalet, Vav, on a Wednesday or on a Friday. The first Rosh Hashanah was on a Friday. So we addressed this question actually last year. And I said then, I had not found an answer, but maybe someone has an answer. Someone actually provided an answer a while ago. So I just found it in our archives. So let me just read the answer. Rabbi Jacobson asked, he said, minute 32. This is literally a year ago. For a source for the answer why then it was on Friday, the first Rosh Hashanah, and afterwards not. So he says, look in Likutei Sichos, volume 14, page 451, a letter of Chai Elul Tafshin Lamed Hey. So it's actually 50 years ago. Chayel. And he says there briefly, the Rebbe's answer is, because in the beginning, when the world was created, it was Chafetz Chesed. God created it with Chesed. Friday is Chesed. Because Sunday, Chacham is on the right side. Tuesday is the middle, is Tiferes. Wednesday is also on the right side, Netzach. And Yesod, which is the Friday, is in the middle. So it's all connected to Chesed and to Rachamim. But today, because then the Eibishter created the world through his initiative, through his kindness and love. Today it has to come through our Aveda, and it's a Yom Din. So therefore, the Yom Din is a Gvura Dikadei. And therefore it's not Masim, the Rebbe explains, that Rosh Hashanah should be, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Din should be connected to Chesed and Rachamim. That's the Rebbe's answer there in that letter. Now this doesn't mean, God forbid, that there's no Rachamim on Rosh Hashanah. It just means initially it's a Yom Din. Okay. So now, let us go on and let's see what else we can address. Why do we pray for our personal needs on Rosh Hashanah and not focus primarily on coronating God as King and on His needs, on God's needs, and trust that He will bless us with all that we need? So actually, that same very year, Tafshin Lamed Hey, Fabring and Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe spoke about the Haftarah of Chana, about how Eli, the Kohen Gadol, thought that she was intoxicated. And the Rebbe explained, Rosh Hashanah, Yedavke asked for Gashmi's Dika things. That's what was disturbing Eli. Why? Because it's a Ruchnis Dika day. You're talking to Hashem. Why are you talking about your needs? Why are you intoxicated with your needs? The Rebbe explained, because Gashmi's Dika needs, like the Baal Shem Tov teaches, Revim v'Gamsmeim, that the fact is our hunger and our thirst, like I said before about sweetness, is because it's our physical needs are connected to our spiritual needs. Nagos Maiminis, L'Kutei Torah brings it, that the Ikar Din Rosh Hashanah is Angashmis. Our needs is not because our needs are not God's needs. Our needs are necessary to serve God, to have health, to have parnasa, livelihood, to have physical comfort. That's why it says, Lama Nesavu Chachamim. Why the Chachamim desire so much Mashiach? So the Rambam says, because they'll be able to then have Menucha, and they'll be able to learn Torah, peace and peace. So our needs are not just our needs are really, ultimately, express the most important thing that Hashem should bless us with so we could serve Hashem. So therefore, the idea of coronating God as King is a great thing. The spirituality of Rosh Hashanah is great, but it has to come down also b'gashmis. Now, there are many more questions that have come in, and I simply running out of time. I'd love to go through many, many more. I will try to do more next week, those that, especially if they're relevant to Yom Kippur. But for now, we're going to have to stop here. I just want to address something with a special schedule of this year's Rosh Hashanah. So we'll conclude with that. This year's special schedule. Every year the Rebbe would always speak that not just general lessons of Rosh Hashanah, but it's kfiyas. Last year, for example, Rosh Hashanah was on Shabbos. First day of Rosh Hashanah. And as such, you don't blow shofar. So there are special lessons that we learn from that. So the question that came in is, what do we learn from Rosh Hashanah going this year's special schedule? What do we learn from Rosh Hashanah going directly into Shabbos? So today the Rosh Hashanah is Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos, without any break. Levud, the Rebbe explains, 3 days in a row, consecutive. So the first thing that you learn from this is that from Rosh Hashanah it doesn't go into a weekday, even though it's Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, which is already an elevated day, but it's technically a weekday. You go right into V'Karasa Shabbos Einig. that everything that Rosh Hashana is happening is going straight into Eineg, which is the Pnimius HaEineg, which is what's stimulated on Rosh Hashana, God's pleasure to renew his contract with us. Kol malachta chasuya. So Shabbos adds a dimension that essentially you could say a spiritual day. So Rosh Hashanah is channeled into the year right away through the lens and through the channel of Shabbos. So it gives additional power that we're beginning the year in Shabbos dik away. So you have MyLife Rosh Hashana and you blow shofar both days, but you also have the Shabbos dik spirit. Has anyone come up with a fitting acronym for Tov Shin Pei Hey? Okay. I have not heard anything. In general, the acronyms that the Rebbe said, Tov Shin Mem Daled, well, even before, Tov Shin Mem Beis, Tei B'Shnas Bias Mashiach, and then Tzegili Mashiach, and then Daled Mem Divrei Mashiach, and then Mem Hey, Melech HaMashiach, and the other years that the Rebbe Mashiach Vadai, that came from the Rebbe. So, if it adds a Yiras Shamayim, like I said before, and someone has something to say, please share it, and I'll be happy to share it with others. But without that, I don't particularly going to look for a acronym. Someone did write, the best I can come up with is Tehei Shnas Pidyon HaShvuyim, which means the redeeming of the captivity of the hostages. May it be a year that all the hostages are safely returned, and of course we shouldn't have to wait until the new year starts. If they are freed safely today in 5784, then automatically they will be safely with their families in 5785. The only issue I have with that is, of course I agree that they should all be freed. But you don't want to designate the year a year of hostages, even the freeing of hostages. That should happen, as you write, immediately. So I don't know if I would consider that, designate that the name of the year. Someone else writes, I remember once reading that on the Frierdiker Rebbe's 85th birthday, can we learn a lesson from 85 being 5 times 17? Toiv. I remember once reading that on the Frierdiker Rebbe's 85th wedding anniversary, the Rebbe spoke about the significance of number 85 being 5 times 17. 5 times Toiv. Gematria Toiv. And he spoke about the 5 different facets of Chesed. Chesed is Toiv, kindness. Can we ask Rabbi Jacobson to elaborate on the Sikha, especially as we are entering 5785? Of course, we don't know what will happen next year, but it would be nice to hope that 85 and 5785 can give us the additional energies of Chesed. We need to have a great and successful new year. Absolutely, and it's a perfect way to conclude this program. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, the last program this year, Tov Shin Pei Daled, and we should go Pei Hey, 5 times Chesed and Toiv. And as a result, it should be B'teva Nira V'Anigla in the most revealed way. Ksiva V'chsima Teva, good gebenched yard. Shana Teva Mesuka, sweet and healthy year for everyone. Nachas from family. Bon Achayim Azena Revicha, children. Parnosa, livelihood and abundance. And all in good health and long life. And we should indeed be Zeich even before the new year comes to the Gula Hamitis V'Ashlema. So I have a feeling Pei as Pedus, something connected to Padiyah, like Pada V'Shalom Nafshi, that something with connected to redemption should be zeichet to the personal and global redemption, the Gula Amitis V'Ashlema. Everyone have a good Geben Sheyar. I thank you again for listening. I thank you for participating, for contributing, and I thank you for your help, both spiritually and also materially. It's a good time, an opportune time. If you'd like to make a nice donation, go to chassidusapplied.com/donate, and you can please help us continue this program, make it grow, spread it further. A good gebenched yar.
This program is brought to you by MyLife Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapplied.com/donate.